5 miles from the last line of shacks marking the beginning of Vargos's city limits marked the beginning of Mama Tex's world. She'd lived in the city for almost 3 decades before she learned the hard way how hard it truly was to thrive. In a city built to actively exploit those that called it home. In pursuit of leaving the city behind for something greater, or maybe just for something different, she left the city one morning and drove her old car out into the surrounding Hardlands Desert, a place once filled with smaller towns and suburbs now blighted by radioactive winds, acid rain, and abandoned. Buildings and highways stretching so far into the distance, it was unclear where the Hardlands ended and the rest of the country began. She'd left around age 30, taking with her a shotgun, a water filter, some ragged clothes, and an item. From her old job she couldn't quite let go, a small old model data chit. The data chit was outfitted to plug into the neural network of a house and handle various day-to-day tasks for a smart house such as controlling temperature, opening and closing blinds, activating appliances, and other homemaker tasks the rich found too tedious to deal with. At the time, she hadn't been sure what she was going to do with it, since finding a working computer in the glass desert was a fool's errand even if you knew where to look. But it gave her satisfaction holding on to a small piece of her old life in Vargos, a reminder of the digital neon-soaked hell she'd left behind. Mama Tex woke up on a summer morning to the sound of engines roaring in the distance, roughly 30 miles up the road by her estimate. She lived far away from the other small settlements that littered the Hardlands, so the noise was an unwelcome sound. She hopped out of bed and exited the old bus she'd built up into the makeshift bedroom and bathroom that she called home now. The old bus was surrounded on all sides by a thick wall of scrap metal and plywood junk she'd dragged to the spot over the years to keep mutated animals and other pests out of the living space, interrupted only by her old car she'd outfitted, with an impressive computer network in the trunk. Although finding computer parts out in the desert was hard, it wasn't impossible. Nothing was impossible for Mama Tex. She may have left the city, but Vargos was still in her. The resourcefulness never left those that called the city home. She wandered through the sand over to the trunk and popped it open, activating the system and popping in the old chit she'd absconded with all those years ago. The screen sputtered for a moment, slowing down under the oppressive heat and sharp sandy winds before a cartoon cow appeared on the screen. She grinned with the few teeth she had left and typed in some prompts, trying her best to shake the dust out of the keyboard. The cow released a digital moo and disappeared, being replaced by a simple pixelated smiley face. "Howdy, Mama Tex. Welcome to your home network. How can I serve you today?" The computer spat out the words in a robotic voice with something approaching an old southwestern United States accent behind it. "Scan for varmints, Sheriff," she said, quieting down as the computer processed her request, and she listened. For the engines in the distance. They were getting closer now, and sounded like a collection of motorcycles and trucks. No good. Anyone from one of the nearby towns wouldn't be coming in force like that. She had outsiders closing in. "Processing complete, yeehaw!" the computer spat out. It printed a sheet of information spread across dirty old receipt paper and beeped as it completed the task. Mama Tex ripped the paper free and nodded. She liked the program retrofitted as a security protocol. Smart houses that did your chores were a waste of time. Why have a computer do something you could easily do yourself when you could make it do something hard like scan a 50-mile radius for every living thing? She looked over the receipt paper, seeing markings for lizards, antelope, a couple of cougars, and thousands of plants, bugs, and rodents. Towards the end of the receipt, she got the confirmation she'd been waiting on. 2 pickup trucks, 10 motorcycles, and 20 people connected to the vehicles. She crumpled the paper up and tossed it in the sand and walked back into the bus. She grabbed her shotgun and a box of shells and made her way to the small tower affixed to the side of the junk wall, struggling to get up the steps as it creaked under her weight. She was spry in her youth, but now, 50 years into living in the Hardlands, her joints ached with every step. She got up to the top in time to spot the approaching convoy of vehicles from her roost. The trucks came first, pulling over to the side and making room for the bikes to park. The folks pulling up to her makeshift compound were all caked in dust, clearly having traveled through the sands for at least 2 days. She sized them up and took a close look at their gear as best she could from the roost, recognizing emblems from Violet Corporation. She sighed and started loading shells into the shotgun. She'd have 8 shots before she'd need to reload again if this turned ugly, though with how heavy they were showing up, she was fairly certain it would. A corpo stepped out of one of the pickup trucks, his suit somehow unblemished by the sand that caked everything outside of the city. A gilded teeth enforcer hopped out behind him, her gold teeth nearly blinding Mama Tex as the sun reflected off of them. The enforcer was holding a fountainhead pulverizer V.2, a grenade launcher strong enough to punch a hole through most military. Hardware and definitely through her junk wall. The corpo grabbed a small microphone from the truck and spoke into it, his sanitized city voice echoing against the red rocks and cacti that surrounded Mama Tex's home. Hardland citizen, we have traced an AI signal to this location from an obsolete chip. Violet Corporation has sent several hot-lung couriers to retrieve the item, and none have returned with the aforementioned hardware. Given the number of messengers that were sent to get it, we can only assume they met their end here at this wall you've built. He grimaced at Mama Tex's makeshift structure, then turned off the microphone, walking up closer to the shooter's roost with his gilded teeth goon in tow. The enforcer was a young woman. Mama Tex felt sorry for her having to do corporate dirty work so early in her life. Didn't she realize there was so much more for her, outside of the city? Poor girl had no idea what she was getting into for the likely shitty pay she was getting from Violet. Well, that's unfortunate, mister, but it isn't called the Hardlands because it's easy to survive here. Maybe they got lost, Mama Tex shouted down at them. The corpo man stared hard at her before letting out a flood of giggles. The other corporate soldiers he'd arrived with all started laughing as well before he gently let his hand drift upward, silencing them in unison. Yes, that's certainly a possibility, but something tells me that's likely not the case. You do know keeping your personal chit on you means you can be tracked as well, right? He shouted up to her. Still, gotta pay for things out here, and unfortunately that's how folks in town like to get paid. Your name is Serena Dalton, correct? The personal chit for a former Violet researcher with that name was traced to this location, and funny enough, the signal for that missing hardware was traced here too. Quite a coincidence to have both of those things traced to the same spot, wouldn't you say? Not sure what you're getting at, but as you can see, this isn't exactly a place for high-end technology in these parts. Mama Tex wiped her brow and placed her wide-brimmed hat on to keep the sun out of her eyes. Well, if that's the case, how about you let us take a look around inside your home? Afraid I can't do that, mister. Guessing you all. Don't know since you're from the city, but around here we don't let strangers in our homes unless they're invited. That means the law, too. We're simply a retrieval team from a company Miss Mama Tex, she said, cutting the man off. Mama Tex? That's what they call me out here. Tex is a slang term in these parts for someone who can shoot. Clean. I've won the sharpshooting contest in the town up the road 5 years running. Well, Mama Tex, we are asking you to invite us in. We aren't the law, just a company looking to get back some property and be on our way. He glanced over at the enforcer beside him, prompting her to move the grenade launcher from her shoulder and into both hands, ready to be aimed. Well, my apologies, but I'm afraid I can't let you in. From the sound of it, you know my name, so I'll just tell you, when I left the city, I also left any obligation to it. And that includes any obligation to let white glove pieces of shit make demands of me. Hope I don't offend you. The man coughed as some wind kicked up a cloud of dust before continuing. Please understand, miss, sorry, Mama Tex, this hardware is useless to you out here. It's an advanced AI for household applications. As nice as your home here is, it won't do much to help you out here, he said, looking back at the enforcer again. She looked like she had an itchy trigger finger. Well, mister, you know who I used to be, so I'm guessing you know in my hands that piece of technology might have more uses than you think. Old as it is, and old as I am, I still know my way around some hard wiring. I'm not sure what you mean. How's about I show you? Mama Tex leaned over to the backside of the shooter's roost and shouted, Sheriff, we got trouble! The soldiers looked around as they heard a quiet hum begin nearby. Then as quickly as it came, it stopped and gave way to the deafening boom of explosives. The road lit up in a series of explosions, ending in a grand eruption of mines underneath the trucks and motorcycles. The soldiers and their gear went flying in all directions as the corpo man ducked and placed his hands over his head. The enforcer raised her grenade launcher, unfazed by the explosion, but Mama Tex put her down with a blast from her shotgun before moving on to some struggling soldiers trying to regain their composure and get a hold on their weapons. One dove. For cover behind a rock, his foot sticking out just enough for her to send a shot right into it, turning it into pulp in a spray of red mist, before she took aim at another one, bringing his rifle up to draw a pin on her. She let loose 2 shots on the soldier, then moved on to one more she saw diving toward the grenade launcher, letting 2 more shots fly to put him down just a foot shy from the weapon. She kept her shotgun up and aimed at the smoldering wreckage, looking for any movement. To her satisfaction, other than some weeping soldiers on death's door, the entire convoy seemed to be shredded to bits. Mama Tex climbed her way down to the ground floor of her fortress and opened the junk gate, walking over to the cowering Corpo man crouching beside his gilded teeth enforcer, her eyes staring blankly forward, devoid of life. She kicked the grenade launcher away and pressed the barrel of the shotgun against the Corpo's head. "Told you, mister. Sharpshooting winner 5 years running." Enjoy another amazing story. Captain Eleanor Hayes stared at the view screen of the UEN destroyer Liberator. Something about the strange alien ship currently displayed upon it just seemed off. It was of unfamiliar design and seemed to slouch against the star-speckled backdrop. She sighed. First contact protocols were clear: approach with caution, attempt communication, and above all else, represent humanity with dignity and honor. "Any response to our hails, Lieutenant Chen?" Hayes asked as she casually strummed her fingers on the captain's chair. "Nothing yet, Captain." "Wait, incoming transmission," came Lieutenant Chen's reply. The view screen flickered, revealing a humanoid figure with iridescent scales and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on what Hayes concluded must be its head. A series of ornate metal bands adorned its neck and wrists. "Greetings, unknown vessel," the alien said in a surprisingly unmelodious voice that made Hayes' fists itch. "I am Trade Master Zix Cole of the hegemonic vessel Exploitive Prophet. State your purpose." Hayes stood from her chair. "I am Captain Eleanor Hayes of the United Earth Navy vessel Liberator. We are explorers from the planet Earth, seeking peaceful contact with new civilizations and potential trade agreements." Zix Cole's upper eye blinked. "Explorers? With a ship with such heavy armaments? Curious? Perhaps we could arrange a trade? Perhaps some of your weapons for some of our commodities?" Hayes smiled diplomatically. "We'd be happy to discuss a cultural exchange, perhaps a tour of our respective vessels. I am sure we have a lot to offer each other." "Absolutely not," Zix Cole responded rather too quickly, and it was at this point that Hayes noticed movement behind him. A smaller figure scurried past, head bowed and wearing what looked like a heavier version of the metal bands. "Is everything all right on your vessel?" Hayes inquired, her smile unchanged even, as she signaled her XO to run a deeper scan. "Perfectly fine. Now about those weapons," Zix Cole replied. Commander Rodriguez leaned closer to Hayes' ear. "Captain, we are detecting over 300 life signs on board that ship, from multiple species, and some are in need of medical attention, and many more are in restraints." "Restraints?" Hayes inquired discreetly. "Cages, Captain. They are in cages," Commander Rodriguez replied, a look of rage on his face. Hayes smiled, vanished instantly. With a predatory look, she returned her gaze to the view screen. "Zix Cole, our scans show multiple restrained individuals aboard your vessel. Care to explain?" The alien's eyes narrowed. "Those are merely my crew and cargo, property, not individuals, and certainly no concern of yours." A cold silence fell over the Liberator's bridge. "I see," Hayes said evenly. "In our culture, we have a very specific term for that arrangement." "Oh?" Zix Cole replied. His 4 eyes blinked out of curiosity. "Slavery." Hayes spat the term out with venom. "And to humans, it is completely unacceptable." Zix Cole's scales rippled with what might have been the human equivalent of amusement. Every advanced civilization practices ownership of lesser beings. It's simple, efficient economics. "Not where we come from," Hayes responded coldly. "I'm going to have to ask you to release those people into my care immediately." The alien laughed, a tinkling sound that made Hayes' skin crawl. "Release my property, Preposterous. What would be the point of owning them to just let them go? That is the point. You don't own them, came Hayes' blunt reply. Captain, Rodriguez whispered, they've activated weapon systems, sir, and are trying to target lock us. Hayes sighed. Zixcol, I am obligated to inform you that if those individuals that are being held against their will aren't released immediately, I will take measures to free them. With what authority? The alien sneered. With the authority of basic decency, Hayes replied, as she nodded at Tactical Office Singh, and also these, as a tactical overlay of the Liberator's weapon systems was transmitted to Zixcol. Zixcol's scales paled, significantly as he looked over the date. You wouldn't attack a trade vessel over mere property? Let me try this once more, diplomatically, Hayes said, trying desperately to remain restrained. In human history, we have made the mistake of practicing slavery, and we learned, though much suffering, that it is morally reprehensible, and I am giving you the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. Your moral posturing is irrelevant in galactic commerce. Zixcol huffed. These slaves, as you call them, are legally obtained under hegemonic law. Hayes rubbed her temples. Rodriguez, how many of their cargo are in immediate medical distress? At least 60, Captain, was Rodriguez's quick response, and their weapons capability. Hayes inquired. Minimal. Nothing our shields can't handle, Captain. Hayes nodded as she glared at the view screen. Zixcol, final offer. Release your cargo and indentured crew into our custody immediately, and we will arrange appropriate reparations for your economic loss. The alien's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. This is piracy, Captain. No, Hayes replied calmly. This is a rescue operation. You have 5 minutes to comply. The alien cut the transmission. Captain. Singh called out, They are powering weapons and engines. Hayes straightened her uniform. Target their propulsion and weapon only. Prepare the Marines for boarding and get medical ready to receive the injured. 3 hours later, the last of the freed slaves, ranging from bipedal avians to crystalline silicon-based life forms, were all being treated in the Liberator's medical bay and a hastily converted cargo hold. The boarding action had been swift and surprisingly bloodless. The slaver crew had little stomach for combat once their automated defenses were neutralized. Captain Hayes entered the medical bay, where a small figure with delicate features and golden fur approached her timidly. The medical staff had already removed the heavy control shock collar that had left raw marks around their neck. You, leader? They asked in halting English, the ship's translation systems having trouble keeping up with all the new languages from dozens of species. Captain Hayes, yes, I am in charge here, she said, as she resisted the urge to pat it on the head. Why help us? No profit for you, came meekly. Hayes knelt down to meet the being at eye level. Where we come from, freedom isn't about profit, it's a right. The alien's largest eyes blinked in confusion. But Master Zixcol say all civilizations have slaves, it is. The way of things. He was wrong, came Hayes' reply with a smile. We had to learn that lesson the hard way, and those centuries of mistakes, we have learnt that we are not perfect, but we are trying to be better. Behind them, through one of the medical bay windows, a brilliant flash lit up space as the slaver vessel exploded into a glittering cloud of debris, the Liberator's weapons making short work of it. After all, evidence was documented and the navigation data secured. The golden-furred being stared at the fading debris field. You destroy ship, why? Hayes stood, her expression perfectly serene as she watched the last fragments of the slaver vessel disperse. Because, she said simply, we really hate slavers. She turned back to the freed beings. Now, let's get you and your friends home, shall we? And if we happen to encounter more of Zixcol's colleagues along the way? She shrugged, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Well, the Liberator was named for a reason. Captain Eleanor Hayes sat in her ready room sipping her lukewarm coffee. Leaning back in her chair, she once again tried reading the medical reports, but it was just too much information to take in. The abuse these poor people had suffered only reinforced her belief that she had acted appropriately, but it had been several hours since Lieutenant Chen had finished transmitting the logs of the encounter to Earth Command, and she wondered if Earth Command would share her belief. Captain Chen said over the ship's intercom, bringing Hayes out of her funk. With a jolt, "Sorry to bother you, but we have an incoming transmission from UEN Command. Admiral Stone wants a word." Hayes straightened her uniform. "Patch her through," she said after a deep breath. "Time to get it over with." The UEN crest rotating on the monitor flashed briefly before giving way to the severe but tired face of Admiral Stone, Captain Hayes, she said in a tone far too polite to be sincere. "We've reviewed your report on your encounter with the slaver ship. All 37 pages of it." Hayes offered a cheerful nod. "Did you like the part where Trademaster Zixcol eyes went pale when we transmitted our armament specs?" Stone pinched the bridge of her nose. "I especially liked," and I will quote, "This is a rescue missions to the point, if a little on the nose." Hayes' smile widened and she relaxed a little. She had known Admiral Madeline Stone since she was a cadet. If she was being this familial, then things weren't. As bad as she was dreading, I felt it encapsulated the moment. "Well," Stone sighed, rubbing her temples. "Command concurs. In fact, I think it is the first time in history that we have all agreed on something. Your actions were in line. With First Contact Protocol 7C engage with empathy and enforce with strength. You and your crew represented humanity with, shall we say, an aggressive form of diplomacy. Good job, and pass along the Admiralties thanks to your crew." "Thank you, sir. I will pass it along to the crew," Hayes said. "Very good, Captain. And now your new orders. You will change course to rendezvous with the medical ship Nightingale, who will be better able to assist your guests. She will be joined by the Vengeance Battle Group as a precautionary measure," Stone announced, a tone of seriousness in her voice. "Just in case those slavers try and reclaim their property." Hayes smirked. "Aye, sir. We will head to the rendezvous immediately." At that precise moment, Commander Rodriguez's voice chimed through the ship's intercom again. "Captain to the bridge. All crew to battle stations. Unknown contact has jumped into the system." "Excuse me, Admiral, I have work to do," Hayes said curtly. "Good luck, Captain. And if it is more of those slavers, you have my full permission to exercise more of that. Aggressive diplomacy," was Stone's reply before the comms channel was closed. Hayes walked onto the bridge of the Liberator. She could sense the tension in the air, but her crew remained professional and alert. "Captain, new contact is broadcasting. A demand for us to surrender and hand over their property. They are claiming they are the bonded extraction enforcement vessel Chains of Profit." Chen's voice tailed off, and Hayes could see he was running the translation again. "I kid you not, Captain, they named their ship Chains of Profit." Hayes blinked. "That's gotta be satire." "Captain, they've armed weapons and have us targeted," Singh chimed in from Tactical. "Captain, they've opened fire." The Liberator shook slightly. Not from damage, but from mild vibration, like a sneeze against a steel wall. "Damage report?" Hayes asked with a sigh. "None," was Singh's reply, visibly unimpressed. "Our navigational shields took the hits, sir. They weapons had the same impact." As a stern look, Hayes moved over to the tactical station and read through the sensor data. "Target their weapons and engines. Disable them, but let's do it nicely." 10 seconds later, the Chains of Profit was adrift, its power systems fried and its weapons useless. "Rodriguez, prepare a boarding party," Hayes ordered. "Chen," Hayes said, turning to the view screen. "Patch me through to the enemy vessel. Let's see if they want to talk." The view screen blinked, revealing a large, greasy-looking being with dangling metal insignia and a sneer to match. "You dare to disable a legally operating hegemonic enforcement vessel," it hissed. "In your stupidity, you fired on us first." Hayes snapped. "And before you start your spew, we've covered the legal slavery speech already, and I now find you boring and morally bankrupt, and now you are being boarded." The screen cut off abruptly, and within minutes, the boarding party has gotten aboard the slaver vessel without any resistance, aided this time by an enthusiastic internal revolt of the ship's enslaved crew, many of which were from the same species as the Liberator had rescued earlier. They quickly helped overpower their oppressors with tools, claws, and what Rodriguez later described in his logs as quite frankly admirable creativity. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice came over the comms. Situation has been resolved. Enemy crew has been neutralized." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Already, that was quick." "Yeah. The members of the crew who were here against their will held an impromptu democratic vote, and as a result, have just ejected the slavers out the airlock. Captain, was Rodriguez's reply, and they have also voted to rename the ship. Rename. The ship was Hayes' stunned response, Unchained Destiny. Kind of poetic, really. They've asked if they can keep the ship and join us, Rodriguez said, with the tone of someone enjoying his current assignment a little too much. Hayes glanced over at Chen and then back at the screen, which was still displaying the now repurposed slaver ship. Well, Command did say they wanted stronger. Diplomatic footprint? I suppose a free ship crewed by liberated ex-slaves counts. Lieutenant Chen, open a priority channel to Admiral Stone. Several minutes later, Admiral Stone appeared on the view screen. Captain Hayes, she said slowly, give me the clip notes on your situation. After updating the Admiral with the latest interaction, the Admiral pondered her response for a second. Captain, you will take the Liberator and set course to rendezvous with the Nightingale as previously ordered. And if the crew of the Unchained Destiny wish to accompany you, they are welcome too. Hayes nodded, but before she could speak, the Admiral continued. Safe voyage, Captain. Hopefully you will have an uneventful journey to save me from more paperwork. And with that, Hayes noticed the smile forming on the Admiral face. Aye, ma'am. Unless another slaver ship turns up, then no promises, was Hayes' response said through a predatory grin. Stone muttered something, possibly a prayer to every admiral before her, then disconnected. Hayes looked around the bridge. All right, folks. Set course for the Nightingale and keep an eye out for any more of Zixcole's friends. She paused, then sat down in her captain's chair, letting her fingers drum once more against the captain's chair. The Liberator turned gracefully in space, flanked by the newly renamed Unchained Destiny, as both ships sailed into the stars, one spreading diplomacy and the other spreading justifiable vengeance. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.